What's going on, guys? Zedd here, bringing you another Marvel Midnight Suns video, and welcome to patch 1.10, or Hunter Edition as we've called it. And this again is for the balance patch that I'm working on with Luis. He is the goat of gameplay modding when it comes to Midnight Suns. We have a lot of things down the pipeline that we're planning to add or integrate other mods that he's done or things he's working on, such as harder difficulty, more general missions, all missions hard, etc. Things like this. They may not be integrated, but they would be recommended. So this is just the next big patch that addresses some of the other issues that I had before. And reception so far to the patch has been great, or the mod has been great. People really seem to be enjoying the changes I've made. There are some issues, and I do touch on them a little bit in this one. Some bugs and some missed opportunities, if you will, and that'll make sense. But this one primarily focuses on the Hunter, and then a bunch of the kind of lesser performing passives in the game. But there are still a few more things along the way. So again, if you're interested in partaking in this, you can navigate to this, which is just in the description. And this link here, Nexus mod link, this will take you directly to where you download it. And then if you want to read the first patch we did, it is linked here as well. So eventually I'm going to make sort of a chart or a table, like a master copy, if you will, of all the changes that have been done and like what the base card looks like versus what our card looks like, so you can get an understanding. But for now I don't have that, so you'll just have to kind of keep a running tally of what's changed. Now, all that said, just like last time, I'm going to make this as legit as possible. Someone had commented on the last ones that they really like this patch note style, so I hope you guys do too. I enjoy this, I enjoy these videos, and I hope it brings some clarity to some changes. And so with that said, let's kind of get into it. So I kind of touched on this a bit, but the Hunter is the main focus of the patch. Hunter has, three versions of three different themes, three different styles that they use and that they've been designed with, right? The power, the light, and the dark. And it's obvious when you go down the light, right? You have the colors, you have the suits, you have the dialogue. Like light and dark are always obvious. Like, oh, okay, this is a thing, this was intended. But it's never really like, what if I wanted to do a power build Hunter? You can. There's balanced color or not so balanced color. But there's no like reason to never commit to light or dark. Since you get Bladestorm anyway as a legendary, don't worry, that hasn't changed, and all these things. So I'm just looking to sort of address the issue of like dark doesn't have as many negatives as it needs to. It's far too strong compared to light and power. And light, it's not good. There's no point other than role-playing purposes to use a light deck. Power cards are pretty good if they're sprinkled in with dark. Like a dark power deck, that's the best Hunter, and it's not even a discussion. But if you were to do an 8 dark card Hunter deck, that's almost a best in slot deck. And realizing this is kind of where I stood back and I was like, how can we really just take Hunter to the next level? And not in terms of power. It's just dark is so overwhelmingly strong compared to power and light. And so I've come up with some solutions. And so one of those things is we're kind of giving dark cards a bit more negative, a few more negatives, excuse me. I'm buffing the damage of some of the light aspects, and then we're actually giving tanking, proper tanking, to the power branch, because I always found it odd that you have things like Guarding Strike, Fortify, Guarding Strike and Fortify, where it's like, oh, gain block every turn, oh, gain counter and block. It's like, okay, great, but there's no taunt, there's no tanking, there's no, like, yeah. So here we go. And the first one, this one is admittedly, this one could be reverted and made a separate mod. This is a test. This is like, let's see how this goes. So first up, overall gameplay. Blade is getting so much love in this mod as he is. The last patch completely overhauled the character. He's in a really good spot now, but there was this sort of cry like, well, I want bleed to be at the beginning of the turn. I want bleed to be at the beginning of the turn. Everyone's been saying this. I don't really share this sentiment, but it's something that I see a lot on the forums and such. So we thought, you know what, screw it, let's do it. Blade needed just a little bit of a kick even after the last patch, And so now it's basically going to be that bleed will activate at the beginning of your turn and the enemy turn. Meaning, if you apply bleed with, say, Daywalker, right, or Strike Plus, as per my patch, if you apply that bleed and you hit end turn, the bleed will occur before the enemies take their turn. Meaning, you can essentially have that extra bleed damage as extra damage, which might kill them. Okay, now how is this different than if it happens at the end? Well, if it happens at the end, you might get the KO, but only after the enemies have attacked. This is a balancing thing that the devs did intentionally. I'm just seeing what happens if we break it, because this also goes both ways. So things like Revenant's Bleed, that damage will activate before your turn, and the vampires, their bleeds, that damage will activate before your turn. So it does swing both ways. And if this ends up being too strong, one of two things is going to happen. Either one, we omit this and bleed goes back to being at the end of the turn, or two, we lower the damage coefficient of bleed. Because you have to think about this. This is going to have ramifications for apply one bleed as a mod on things like shield bounce, air superiority, Blade Storm, World Breaker, etc., etc. Like, this is not just for Blade. This is going to affect the bleed mod entirely in a very dramatic way. So it might be overkill. I'm gonna have to figure it out. I'm starting another playthrough. I'm starting a full modded playthrough in tandem with Venom's release, so I can show off all these changes in real time and show the different build paths that we've been testing. And once I go through that, that'll be when I determine if this is too strong or not. And it might be. But anyway, that's a thing, so have fun with that. Alright, let's do Hunter first, because that's the bulk of the patch, and there's a lot that's changing. Some are dramatic, some not as much. So Hunter is a very, very strong character for good reason, as they should be. But I want all three versions of the Hunter to feel good, and right now it's like just play Dark or Mixed Hunter, and there's no other way to play, at least at the higher difficulties. And if you're playing on story or heroics, you can play anything you want. That's been true this entire time, and I'm just making some of these cards and playstyles more fun, because the reality is Dark is fun to play. It's not fun to use garbage cards that don't do anything. It's not fun to use, like Blade is just so incohesive. He's just not fun. So that's why we buffed him, right? So anyhow, first up, Unbalanced Collar is now Balanced Collar, in that increase the number of card plays to activate from 3 to 4. So the reason this change came about was sort of in response to, in the base game, you can almost indefinitely loop. If you've ever played on the final mission with Hunter, I won't spoil anything, but if you take Balanced Color and you build your deck certain ways, you can just have infinite turns. And I've done this, and so I know it's possible. But then with my mod, it's even worse, because I made Deadly Ground free. So Balanced Collar became just an infinite repeating loop tool, and this was I wouldn't say it's an oversight, but it's something that was not considered. And so we have upped it from 3 to 4, so now it takes 4 power card plays instead of 3. This fixes the infinite loop issue, or at least makes it not infinite. You might get lucky, like, oh, sick, I just drew 3 more. Oh, I'll just do 2 more. But you're not going to have it just constantly cycling itself. Because someone tried taking 2 Wraths and then 2 Deadly Grounds. And yeah, it was just a disaster. So yeah, that's why we made that change. So now this brings it more in line, even when you're not building to infinitely loop it. It was just such a ridiculous collar, way too versatile, way too easy to use. And with the buffs that I've given to power, I have to keep this in check, or else it's gonna just get out of control again. Next up, Paragon Collar. Decrease the number of light card plays to activate 5 to 4. My apologies. So this is the one where, after 5 card plays, your next one's free. I just felt as though light just needed a little bit of love. This felt too much. I didn't affect the dark one because I think dark is really strong. And so just the Paragon for now, maybe the dark one later. Keeping my eye on that one. Unity Collar card. Now, you might not even remember or know what the Unity Collar does, because nobody uses it. The Unity Collar, you need to play 1 power, 1 dark, and 1 light card in any order. And you get Unity Collar card. The card is a free play, gain or apply 1 fast. That's it. That's all it does. And so I've added the effect draw 2 cards. So it's apply 1 fast and draw 2 cards. Now, this might get changed down to draw 1 card, but draw 1 card doesn't seem impactful enough to run this collar in comparison to things like Obsidian Collar, Balanced Collar, right? So I wanted to do this, and then plus the way like Master of the Hunt works, it doesn't affect Unity Collar, so I'm okay with Unity Collar still having a strong effect of draw 2 cards, so it's all good. And yeah, so feel free to maybe consider this one now. If you play mixed decks, maybe you run like heal, right? And then you run, or like, heal, inspire, there's 2 light cards. And then maybe you've got 2 power cards in there, and then 4 darks. If you're running a deck like that, maybe now you can consider Unity Collar. It feels nice. It's good for mixed builds. It's the collar you want to use, but it was just so useless before. Well, give it a shot. Fully charged passive, the meme, the literal meme of the community. So fully charged is broken. It's broken at all stages of the game. No matter what, you get it so early. You can get it as early as, what is it, Research 4? And that's just ridiculous. So 1 resist or 1 heroism every turn is ridiculous. So this may be too much, but we have made it so instead of being every turn, it's only 50%. Just like Doctor Strange's passive as well being 50%. So this will bring it more in line. It might be too much, admittedly. We could turn this up to maybe 75 or something like that, something arbitrary. But just every turn felt really bad, and I didn't want it to be only resist every turn because then that's too strong. I didn't want it to be heroism every turn because then that's lazy and it's just Doctor Strange's every or passive. So I still want that little bit of RNG, that little bit of like, oh, I would love a resist, or oh, I could love an extra heroism right now, rather than being like, oh, I'm just gonna get one or the other and I'm just always gonna benefit. So yeah, might be too much, but that's the thing now. Fully charged now is not broken. Master of the Hunt. So this passive is also broken. If you weren't running fully charged, you were running Master of the Hunt. Like that's pretty much how this dynamic goes. Master of the Hunt has 2 effects. The first effect is it reduces the thresholds for your collars by 1. I do recognize that the Paragon collar decrease is further buffed by this, but that's less important. What's more important is Hunter is immune to all negative status effects. This is stupid. This is good on like casual playthroughs, but I'm a firm believer in like don't hold your players' hands. This is hand holding. This is like old Vapors of Valtor, which we've completely reworked in this mod as well, if you're just seeing this for the first time. Master of the Hunt is brain dead. I hate it. I always hated how it worked. And so we just took off one of the effects because I figured if I'm having the effectiveness of fully charged, it makes sense to have the effectiveness of the other broken passive. And so now, hopefully, it opens up some other passive choices, or at least you don't feel so stuck on fully charged or so stuck on Master of the Hunt. And maybe you consider running things like the dark, the dark armor passive, which is an increased chance to draw critical on dark cards, things like that. So yeah, and this one's sort of a big one. Symbiote Shell. We changed the passive and the card. So the Symbiote Shell passive is base, a 10% chance to add a Symbiote Bind card to your hand. 10% chance, and it's only when you, what is it? It's only on KO, I believe. Top of my head, I can't remember. So we bumped it up to 25%. Now that might seem ridiculous, like, oh, okay, 25%. And it might seem ridiculous because the symbiote card now we're adding free. The base card is apply bind and it costs a card play and 1 heroism. So it's a cheaper thwip, right? But I never felt like that was good at 10%. I never felt like that was good at using a card play. And so we're upping the percentage. We're making it free. This might be broken. I don't think so. And it's going to work well as sort of a tanking card, or it's when they get hit. Whatever. It's when they get hit, I think. I'm hoping this brings Symbiote Shell into the conversation. Regardless of what the activation parameters are, I did think it through before this, and so give it a shot, see what you think. I think it feels good now, and yeah. So that's it for passives and collars on the Hunter. Quite a few changes, a lot of it just bringing the top down and the bottom up and trying to sort of keep everything in the middle because Hunter having collars and passives is fun. Having 30 cards is fun. I want every version of the Hunter to be enjoyable, and we just weren't quite there yet, even after my last patch. So this one really looks to deal with all the problems Hunter has, and I think we hit it. So here we go. First card on the list is Charge. So Charge base before the mod is just a forceful knockback, and it has no damage, and then when you upgrade it, it gains a % chance to stun. Nobody uses this card. And if you use this card, you're just trolling, because Slash is a significantly better version of this card, and it is what it is. So the new one, we've kind of reworked it a little bit. Charge base, added the taunt keyword. Added effect, gain 1 resist. So when you use charge now, it's going to do like Soul Blast, just knock somebody into somebody. Okay, great, not a whole lot of damage, but it's CC. And by using it, you're taunting, and then you're gaining 1 resist. Charge plus, removed the stun effect. I did this because I didn't want to overload the skill, and 25% is just stupid, and you're probably going to break it by doing damage to that unit anyway, and I just didn't like it, so I got rid of it. Again, applied taunt keyword, gain 1 resist. That's not different at all. But the upgrade, if you will, is on KO, gain 1 counter. This is meant to be used in tandem with things like Fortify or other taunt cards that are going to come up, or if you hit the Guardian, they taunt to you. If you hit the Nest Mother, it taunts all the Lilin. If you taunt a wolf, it taunts all the wolves. Like, think about that, right? There are ways to manipulate taunt, even though you don't have taunt. So you can use that in sort of really interesting ways. Stack your resist, stack your block, gain the counter with charge, and boom, your Hunter is just a monster, right? Just a tank. I love this new charge, and I love the charge card animation. I love its, like, everything about it's cool, except its effect. And so this really brings charge into the fold, and it's just a fun option. It's the taunting, tanking version. Now, to talk about that, and I was talking about Slash, let's talk about Slash. So Slash, I added keyword taunt on both versions. And on the upgrade, I've increased the damage from 50% to 60%. So the choice you would make here between Charge and Slash, if you're choosing, is Charge is going to give you that on KO gain counter. And remember, that's on KO on a knockback card. So you could knock a full unit back into a minion, and it would get the KO, and then you'd get the counter, right? Whereas Slash is the DPS variant. It's the, okay, I'm going to do a ton of damage because having 60% on forceful knockback is an absurd ratio, by the way. So this card is going to hit so hard, especially if you're strengthened. And so I wanted to keep the taunt on it. I want power to be a taunt tanking machine. So this is going to make Slash slightly worse in some situations, better in more, so I was happy with this. Holy Flame, very, very simple buff. Increase base damage modifier by 50% on the base, and then to sort of match that, I doubled it on the buff. So I didn't realize this. Its damage does not go up when you upgrade it. I mean, I never really thought about it because Holy Flame's a terrible card, and so now it's not a terrible card. Doing 200 base damage modifier as a point and click with the option to heal means that this gives light Hunter users the option to just cut heal or to cut Holy Burst. You don't have to run heal because now you have this really beefy heal. Holy Flame's heal coefficient is very good. I think it's 200 or 225, something like that. But now you're not going to feel like you're wasting if you decide to actually attack with it at 200%. It's not enough to make it a must slot in or broken by any means, but I am effectively doubling the damage of Holy Flame because it was just a joke. So I hope you enjoy that, you Light Hunter players out there. Now we get into one of the first really interesting nerfs in that it might not actually change the card at all. But TBD. Wild Strike plus and only plus. Increase the number of vulnerability gained from 1 to 2. So the thing with Wild Strike right now is it does an absurd amount of damage. I believe it is 275%. Yeah, 275%, which is ridiculous. On top of the fact that move has cure, on top of the fact that one vulnerability can be circumnavigated with last sight, that's the other issue. So you'd use Wild Strike, you could get quick on it, you could just farm, units and kill them and kill them and kill them constantly. Use Wrath, draw last attack played, Wild Strike, kill them, and like this is so overwhelmingly powerful that this decision was to go, okay, if you're going to play that way and then use last sight to survive, that's smart. I like it. But let me make it now that you're going to have to do that again in order, or do something to deal with that vulnerability. That's why I did it. And it's a compounding effect. So before you could do Wild Strike, Wrath, Wild Strike, Last Sight, and you'd have 2 turns of vulnerability. Yeah, okay, I can make do, I can get over it. Now, if you do Wild Strike, Wrath, Wild Strike, Last Sight, that's 4 vulnerability. So now you have to run a cure, right? You have to use a cure, you have to bring a cure on another unit. Like, I want Dark to be snowbally in its negatives if you try to be explosive with it. I want it to be like this ebb and flow, like will I, won't I, will I explode, will I not explode, because the damage is so enormous on Dark that it just needs to be redone. And I don't think it's a stretch to suggest people bring Cure in order to work around Dark's now present shortcomings. I think that adds just more layers to it. It might be too much. Again, we're gonna find out. Again, your feedback is important with this kind of stuff, and we'll see. So that's Wild Strike. Morning Star. This is another big one that might push it over the edge, but I don't think so. So right now in the regular game, the Morning Star build, while kind of fun, is super awful. It takes way too many uses. It takes up way too many deck slots. You have to use things that either draw last attack or Holy Gift. Morningstar needs to get quick modded on it. Like, it's just not good. It's not good. So just as a start, Morningstar might need something else, but just as a start to maybe open up the prospect of using it more, plus the fact that I buffed Paragon Collar, right? What I've done here is, on both versions, I've increased the base damage modifier by 50 on base and 100 on the plus. The base version takes 1 less use to stack, meaning you only have to use the unupgraded Morningstar 2 times to max out your offense. Okay? Because when you use Morningstar, it's 50%, 50%, 50%, 50%, and then you're good to go, right? Now on base, it only takes 2. But there's no increase to how much damage it does. It's just you get there in 1 less card play. Likewise, the upgraded version takes 2 less uses for a total of 3. So you have to use the bonus one more time than the base, but you're going to be swinging for 300 offense, which, just to point out, is more damage than Wild Strike. The difference is when Wild Strike is immediately 275 damage, and you're using it every time at that power level, you're gaining the vulnerability as a repercussion, right? Morningstar, instead, while not having the negatives, has to build up to that, okay? So that's kind of the difference in playstyle. And so this change will make Morningstar more consistent, less picky to build around, less reliant on quick to feel worth it, and hopefully it's enough to keep it in line, but we shall see. Next up, this one's just a small slap on the wrist, heal. Heal's healing coefficient is just ridiculous. In the early game, it makes everything trivial, and even well into the game, the healing is very significant, although you do desire the draw more than the heal. But recognize that by nerfing the base healing modifier from 300% down to 250 on base and 300% to 275, this change inevitably makes the overhealing draw 2 cards more difficult to do. Okay, so that is like a byproduct of this change. Keep that in mind. This isn't just it's healing too much, I'm going to tone it down. It's that I felt like heal plus was way too consistent as not only heal but a draw, and then whatever mod you have, if it's say apply resist, apply conceal, redraw it again, conceal, it's way too overloaded if you get apply to resist. So I just wanted to touch its consistency a little bit. Just a hair. It should be good. It is still good. And I also, because of this, I wanted to make dark, what is it? Dark heal or whatever, the dark one, more desirable slightly. I know it's not much, but it may be more desirable. We shall see. So just a slap on the wrist, nothing crazy. Now this one's a biggie. We have completely reworked Dark Blessing. And as I've written here, credit to Highborn on the Discord for bringing up this idea, and I kind of just played with it and worked off of it, but credit where credit's due. Dark Blessing is pretty well unanimously considered one of the most useless cards in the game. It's not the worst card in the game, because the situations when you would use it, it's really good. The problem is that situation is gone by the time you've done like 10 missions. If that. And so it's just not good. It feels awful. Nobody runs it. Nobody likes it. And this card needed something, but I wanted to, so the discussion I had with Highborn was, what keeps the idea of a blessing, right? A buff, a benefit, and then skill card, while maintaining this newfound concept of negatives for a positive, the give and the take, the ebb and the flow. And we had originally came to the idea, well, what if we just make it free and generate heroism? It's like, well, yeah, but no one wants the effect. You'd only run it for heroism. And then it was, well, you know, what if it gave a buff? What if it was like, you know, strengthened? Like, well, just raw strengthened would be kind of ridiculous. And then, so anyway, we kind of went back and forth on this. And what I decided on was, we'll keep it skill card. It still generates to heroism. That hasn't changed. You can still mod free on it. That hasn't changed. Here's what's changed. And we kept the self-damage modifier exactly what it is. I didn't change it on the base copy. It's a big number. If you've ever used Dark Blessing, it's like, ugh, ouch. Like, that hurt. That did a lot of damage, bro. But the new effect is gain 1 strengthened and gain 1 vulnerable. Now, here's the thing that I want you to think about. So this is literally a point and click, give me heroism, give me strengthened card. But there's a catch. When you take self-damage and you have vulnerable or strengthened already, you take more damage. So it's a trade-off, and that's why on the upgraded version, I lowered the modifier just a little bit, just to give you a bit of compensation, and it's a draw 1 hero card. And because it's draw 1 hero card within, you can still get, you should still be able to get free on this. If not, we'll have to fix that, but it should be fine in the way that it's been redesigned. So should be fine. If it's not, we'll fix it. So the buff Dark Blessing is just a go berserk mode. Let's do something crazy. Let's draw that wild strike. Let's draw that last sight. This card feels awesome. It's super sick. It leans into this idea. And so again, like, you might end up vulnerable stacking yourself by playing Dark, and that's by design. I kind of want you to really think about these decisions and think about, how do you want to play this character? Do I need cures? Do I need to mix the deck? Do I need to bring an item? Do I need to use my move to cure? Things like that. So this is sick. Yeah. Wrath, excuse me. Nothing's changed other than the duration of the effect. So right now in the game, Wrath has it's too good. It's way too good to not always run at least 1 copy of, and 2 copies probably just feels awful. And the reason why is, by the time you get to the 3rd turn, if you're taking things like Balance Collar, Heal to draw, and this and that, and you're drawing through the deck, you're going to see Wrath again and again and again and again. And I don't know about you guys, but I always have the Wrath buff on. Like, 100% uptime from the time I play the first version, or the first copy, excuse me. 100% uptime. Why is this bad? Well, it invalidates bringing the dark collar, the light collar for the crit. It invalidates bringing the Demon Child passive, I think it's called Heightened Senses, where you have a higher chance of drawing crit on all your cards, right? That's the one where you go the Charlie mission, and yeah. So even though that passive has some Charlie benefits, the Hunter benefit is increased crit chance on all cards. So there is still a reason to take it. Wrath just made all those passives completely worthless. So I'm making it slightly less desirable, and probably wouldn't want to run 2 copies of it by only making it so the crit lasts that turn and 1 turn. Meaning, so that the turn you play Wrath, your stuff goes crit. The next turn, your stuff is crit. But the next turn, it's gone. So it's still going to be an amazing card. It's just not going to be, hopefully, permanent uptime. So that's all this change does. Nothing else changes. It's still amazing. Hopefully, it's not 100% uptime. Okie dokie. With me so far? Guarding Strike. This card has a weird design. Nobody uses it. Nobody likes it. And so I made it desirable, hopefully. Guarding Strike base. Increased block gained. So the amount of block generated from Guarding Strike is based off of your max HP. If you didn't know, now you do. Now, it was originally 10%. I bumped it up to 15%. This buff is honestly meaningless other than I wanted to do it. And gain the taunt keyword. So this is one where it's like, okay, if you play it after generating block, and this is the logic, right? You gain the block, and then maybe on the 3rd turn, you're like, okay, that's enough block, I'm going to taunt now, right? Or I have enough block and resist, I'm going to taunt all the wolves now. I don't need this in my hand anymore. And the damage of Guarding Strike is a pretty hefty 200%. It's a solid card. Like, it's no Wild Strike, but it's not horrible. And then the upgrade, though, is where it gets very significant. And I want to explain why. Increased block gain 15% to 25%. In the base game, it was 15%. On my mod, it's 25%. Meaning, theoretically, if you had Guarding Strike in your hand for 4 turns, you'll have full block bar. And recall that you start with block as well from, what is it? It's called Fortitude, right? Yeah. So, also taunt keyword and additional effect gain 1 resist. So again, this is like the tank card. You generate the block, Oh, let's taunt him. There's my resist. I'm gonna fortify. Like, it feels good to kind of play tank hunter now with all these changes and run a full power deck, and Guarding Strike is just, it felt way better. And it's 25%. It's almost as good as this patch's dig in on Cap. So just to give you an idea, like, that's what we're talking. It's Cap's passive, but 1, 2, 3, 5 times better. So Guarding Strike is sick now. Now, these are 2 big ones, and I want to talk about them. Fury. Base and plus removed the final keyword. Fury is an insanely overstated card. It is 2 heroism, high damage, I believe it's 225. 225 or 250. Apply vulnerable and mark on upgrade. That's insane. But nobody uses it. And do you know why? It's because there's no room for it in the current design of Hunter. There's no room for it when you're taking, 4 attacks, 3 skills, and 1 heroic. There's no room for it when you're taking 3 attacks, 2 skills, and Blade Storm plus whip, and oh, there you go. Like, Fury, it's a good card. It just can't compete with other Hunter heroics. And so instead of nerfing other Hunter heroics, because everyone plays Hunter differently, I just thought, you know what, let's just take the final off of Fury and see if people use it. I love Fury. And I'll try it. Like, I think this card's great now. Whereas before it was like, didn't really need to use it, so I won't. So yeah, this one's actually huge. So we'll see how that goes. And then last up is Annihilation. So Annihilation is very ridiculous. It has many 1-turn KO possibilities in Ultimate 3, level 40 missions. It's insane. It does so much damage. It's not great for story missions because the story missions are 2 parts. However, it is bonkers for general missions. So I've nerfed it in 3 ways. Again, this might be too much, but it's almost like the Vapors of Valtor, where I want to knee-jerk nerf it a little bit and then see what happens. There might be too much gain vulnerable now in the dark deck. That's something that I would just need feedback on. So what did we do? Well, I lowered the amount of damage per heroism by 10% on both layers. Why? Because as it stands, Annihilation Plus out damages Bladestorm in the base game at 4 heroism. I've done the math. It's about 4 heroism, 4.6 in many cases, but you wouldn't round that to 5, you'd round it to 4 because of knockback damage and all that. But now it should be able to out DPS Bladestorm by about 6 heroism. Is pretty well what it was, 6.1. So now when you do invest into it like Crack the Sky, like Midnight Special, it's still going to be dummy ridiculous. But it's not going to be point and click so much more damage than Bladestorm that there's never a reason to run Bladestorm. Because when you're spending 4 heroism for Bladestorm, which I know it has forceful knockback, I'm a huge Bladestorm fan, but the AoE is a lot smaller versus Annihilation, which has a bigger AoE. It's easier to use, more damage. Excuse me. Yeah, so there's that. Added final keyword. That's a thing. I did that as well. And added effect gain vulnerable. Now, the vulnerability maybe doesn't need to be here. Maybe not at 2, maybe not. It's hard to say. But it was a suggestion because when you mod Annihilation 2, it just, oh my god. It just becomes ridiculous. So, yeah, that's Annihilation. I know it got hit pretty hard, but it's so overtuned. One-shotting Nest Mothers, one-shotting Guardians, two-shotting Fallen Reinforcements. Like, what is that, bro? Like, that's not okay. So, damage only got a small slap on the wrist, and there's a hefty cost to it now. Kind of like No More, kind of like Worldbreaker. Well, not like Worldbreaker, but you have to get Rage for Worldbreaker to be good. Yeah, that's what I mean. So, yeah, those are the Hunter changes. Quite a few. It's the bulk of this video, but there's still lots more to talk about. Don't worry. So, all that said, what could possibly be next? Well, glad you asked. So, Blade. Blade, his changes have been universally well received. I like them a lot. I think they're really good. But people were comparing Strike to Daywalker. They're like, Daywalker kind of feels like ass now. And then there was this conversation about, well, how do we use full combo more in the game? And then Luis was like, hey, we could actually just do that. And like, oh, okay. So we kind of went down this train of thought, and with putting bleed at the beginning of turns, it was like, okay. So not only did I buff his passive, I've upped it by 5% at level 1 and 5% at level 2. Just a small touch, right? Nothing super crazy. Just a small touch. Daywalker now, you have to make a choice, because originally, prior to this change, there wasn't really a reason to ever full combo Daywalker. It does decent damage, but you didn't want to do it. Now, I'm sort of doing this in a way that buffs Reaper builds, I guess, and gives it a choice of commit or chain, right? Full combo, apply 2 bleed. I also did this because like I've said before, I want to try to take people away from this idea of feeling like they must use Make 'em Bleed. Now, Make 'em Bleed obviously draws hero cards, which is good, but maybe you don't want to feel like you must run a card. And so this was my way of giving Daywalker bleed without just giving it one apply bleed, because that would be ridiculous on Daywalker, and then it would make Strike bad. And you see where I'm going with this? Like, I had to be careful with what I do with blades so I don't make Glaive feel useless, or Strike feel useless again, or Daywalker feel useless, and all these things. So I'm really happy with this. It just gives you the choice. You may never use it. You may go, that's useless, but someone out there is going to use it and one-shot a freaking Nest Mother by using the heroism on Daywalker into Reaper, and they'll go, this character is ridiculous. That's what I want, because right now no one's saying that about Blade. So yeah, that's what we have for Blade. Passive up a little bit, Daywalker new effect, and it's in tandem with his style. Captain America, no changes. I'm really happy with the changes we did to him last patch, and he's overall just such a solid character anyway. Nothing to really say there. Marvel, I'm really happy with the changes last patch. It kept her identity in check. It gave her more resistant counter options. It made getting binary feel more impactful. She does more damage in binary now as well. But there were still a few outliers, that being her passive and Supernova. So her passive now, I've completely doubled the percentages at both tiers. So from 10% to 20% and from 20% to 40%. I do recognize that it is possible that you just sort of have perma counter on Carol. I'm fine with that. Why? Because you have to either generate resist to navigate that issue, or she has to get hit and lose block that you have to generate to maintain binary. So it's like, if you get the counter, great. But if you don't use it, who cares? But now it's going to happen way more often at 40%. And yeah, something you can not play around, but arguably be like, oh, well, you know, if Carol gets countered here, I could just leave this guy alive and then she'll kill him on his turn, right? That's a decision you could actually commit to now, whereas before you would never make that decision because a 20% chance or a 1 in 5 chance, that's not smart thinking. And Supernova, the point and click AoE in binary, it was still good, but it didn't feel legendary. It just felt epic. So I just gave it some love. This might even be too much, a whole 50% increase on the plus, but that's okay. A lot of people weren't running Supernova in their decks, and I did buff Photon Beam, so it's not like it's just 1-for-1 better than Photon Beam now. I think you would take either of them or both for different reasons, because the other issue with Marvel is her Fist of Radiance was really the only heroic you would ever take. And now with this Supernova change, I truly think that all of her heroics are worth taking in some facet or another. So yeah, this now puts Carol in a really good position. It makes binary Captain Marvel insanely strong while still having a little bit of downside, a little bit of effort to get there. Because I do want to keep that design philosophy in check. So yeah. Doctor Strange, the only thing I did was I gave Vapors of Altor a little bit of a okay, I overstepped. So when I changed Vapors of Altor, I lowered its healing from 200% to 175, and then I took away the conceal and it gains apply 1 resist now. So now I realized, okay, well, it's not good enough to really take as a heal. It's not good enough to take as a resist. So it's kind of in this it's not good enough situation. And so I thought, well, when would you take heal? When would you take restore? Why would you do that? Well, it's because you want a form of sustain. Okay. I looked at restore's coefficient being full heal, and I looked at heal's coefficient being 300. And I was like, okay, I don't want it to be heal 2.0, but I do want it to be close enough that you can maybe think of it that way. And so Vapors of Altor increase healing modifier from 175 to 250. Pretty significant, but now Doctor Strange full on has a heal, and I'm okay with that. So that's that. Not much to say other than I overstepped or I didn't consider. Yeah, there we go. Fixed it. Now this is a biggie. This was where the whole conversation about passives came in the light in the first place. The worst part about Ghost Rider is nobody likes his passive. No soul likes getting souls. Like, no shot. So now we have completely removed the auto generation aspect of the Drain Souls card. Now, what's the problem with that? Well, now it's like, well, the Drain Soul card, if you do that, it's not worth it. Never worth running in the deck. Ever, ever, ever. What did I do instead? Well, I removed the base heroism cost from 1, or I removed it and lowered it from 1 to 0. So now it's 0 chain 2, 1 chain 3, 2 chain 4, 3 chain 5, and 4 chain 6. Yeah. Yeah. Because Ghost Rider is already relatively heroism expensive in general, so it becomes hard to justify Drain Soul at the 1 heroism just for chain 2 at 50% offensive rating. It's not good. So hopefully now people consider it more, plus all the other changes I made to things like Judgment, Retribution, Immolate, all those things. Drain Soul is going to be much, like, feel way better to put in the deck. It's going to be way more reliable as a healing skill. And now you're not going to automatically generate this clunky junk, because when it gets added to your hand and you redraw it, it still goes back in the deck. It doesn't go away. So that's why that part of the passive was so awful. So, yeah. That's that. I hope Drain Soul sees some use now in regular decks, and I'm curious to see where it goes with mods, because again, nobody's modding Drain Souls. So, let's have some fun with that. I'm excited because Ghost Rider has, you know, one build in my mind, and I think now I'm at a point in this patch where, or this mod, where he's going to have more than one build, and I'm very excited about that prospect. Hulk, no changes, though there is something on the watch list regarding Hulk. We'll get there. Iron Man, fine spot. New plan is being reworked. I'll get there when I get there. Magik, same thing. I still buffed Trapdoor and people still reported it didn't feel like enough. I went, okay, fine. The issue is I love where we're going with the character, but Trapdoor is still a trap card to take, so I'm over buffing the crap out of it. Base damage 200 on Trapdoor Plus, which is insane, considering that the base damage of the one on the live game is 125. So Trapdoor may be worth taking now, maybe in the early game if you pull it in an early coil. Pretty sick to use. And late game, if you like the maneuverability of the point and click move enemy here, maybe now you'll consider it a bit more. Nico, no changes. Pretty happy with where she is right now. Although the RNG stuff, I maybe want to do a bit of a Nico rework one day, but not today. All right. Scarlet Witch is another big one. Another big one conceptually, another one that I get a lot of pushback about, and so I want to talk about it a little bit. So everyone keeps saying Wanda needs moves in her kit. Wanda needs moves in her kit. +1 moves, you know, Wanda, blah, blah, blah. The reason I don't want to do that is because I do want to respect the design philosophies that went into her in the first place to a degree. That being, she's a bit more tactical, she's a bit more setup oriented, she's a bit more quirky to navigate. All these things. You're encouraged to use the old 1-2 upgrades and push people into her and shove people into her. But no one really does that. They think that she herself has to be the one to make the decisions, which is why on the last patch I buffed the ever-living crap out of Unleashed and made her an AoE queen, and she still is. However, there was just a few more things that stood out, like Hexfield was still pretty hard to use, her passive still wasn't being used at all, and that wasn't good. I wanted her passive to see some use. I think it's a lot of fun. It's good. I like it. So here is what I did. In order to not give +1 move on abilities, Louise found a way to give the, you know how Supernova is point, click, and go, or Blade Storm, or Annihilation. Pick any AoE that works that way. They found a way to take that targeting system and apply it to other cards. Hexfield now, when you use it, instead of just being around Wanda, it's going to point and click, relocate you there, and then do the attack. So I'm giving the move inherently to Hexfield, which was one of the more problematic cards that needed it. Sure, you know, Chaos Field, but you can't just give that to Chaos Field. Chaos Field, if you could just easily control where you were with Chaos Field, it would be so ridiculous. So Hexfield now is the move without giving the move into the kit. And it also now will open up her passive, making that easier to use. You can also use Hexfield now as a defensive tool and just get out of harm's way, which is just fun to have that flexibility. And so this should feel really awesome now. I'm a huge Scarlet Witch fan, so I feel like now we're getting to a point where she still has some nuance to the kit, but she feels good to play. She's a solid support or DPS, depending on what you want to do. And the last big one is we've changed No More. Reduced health consumption from all of her life to 90%. This is now functioning in a way where she will not KO, therefore you won't lose a star. But more importantly, and this is the big one, I'm effectively doubling the damage of No More. It is a very expensive heroic card. It does work in tandem with Unleashed. And because it's damage per health consumed, it's sort of like a scaling card. So it, you know, doubling the damage sounds insane, but it's like, well, it depends how much health Wanda has, right? Or yeah, how much health Wanda has. So it's not like a free gimme. But that's why I felt like No More was just such an awkward design. It took away your star, it KO'd your unit, which you can't even revive them on Ultimate 3. So like, what, like, hello, what the heck? And I always hated that. So now this version of No More is way more overtuned, way more solid, way more worth the cost, worth the deck slot, doesn't kill your unit. This is what it should have been, or something akin to this. So now I'm happy with Scarlet Witch. Everything is as it should be. Her passive doubling, I didn't talk about this, sorry. Her passive doubling in percentage. This is because it's just a debuff, right? It might be slow. It might be days. Like, yeah. So, yeah. These are the Scarlet Witch changes. I don't know. She's so insane now. I really encourage you to try her on this patch. If you haven't, I think you'll like her. Spider-Man, we just tweaked his passive here. The issue with his passive is people would only ever talk about the secondary piece, the free environmental attack. And then whenever you had Bring the House Down activate, you were like, oh, okay, cool, thanks, I guess. Kind of think about it like Captain Marvel. I just want it to happen more. I want you to like kind of go with the level 2, like, okay, I'll vault into this enemy, but I really need this heroism to come back. You can make that decision now at 40%. You never could make that decision at 15%, ever. So that's it. That's all the changes there. Just a bit of a love tap. It might even need to be higher, but I thought about it in the same way as Captain Marvel's passive, so that's why I'm matching its coefficients. Wolverine. So Wolverine is he's had a lot of changes in this mod, and this patch sort of looks to talk about this was sort of the conversation that was like, okay, full combo, how does it work? How can we use this? How do we make tank Wolverine more desirable without just nerfing the damage one entirely? And it was a long conversation. So, just to talk about the little blurb at the top there, Wolverine's passive healing is kind of a meme. It's not great, it's not horrible, but it sucks to lose a card just for some healing. So without completely reworking the passive, which is quite difficult to do, I just sort of over buffed it, so now the healing is very, very significant. So there's that. Lethal Pounce is just insane. The card is ridiculous. You always take 2 of it, and it's the only way to play DPS Wolverine. It's the only card he has that does anything for him, and it's just not good. And then there's chain swipes. I've talked about chain swipes a lot, and the problem with chain swipes is it almost feels like you really should and want to run it, but no one ever does because it doesn't do anything. And it feels really bad, like really bad, to use it for full combo 1 week. Like that's not very good. So here's what I did. Chain swipes base. Increase base damage modifier by 2%. This is strictly a love tap. Nothing to say other than that. Base. Apply 1 week. Okay, so now we're going away from the full combo, and it still taunts, but it also applies weaken, which makes the taunting less risky. Okay? The problem with tank Wolverine is once you taunt everything, he can't survive. Now chain swipes is that tanking card. It is the means of like, okay, this isn't really going to do any damage, but I'm just going to, oh, I'll taunt you, I'll taunt you, I'll taunt you, weak, taunt you, weak. And that's what the card now is for. And then the full combo effect upon upgrade now is going to be apply 1 vulnerable. This is because full combo needs to have a trade-off. The trade-off now is, okay, I only get to taunt and weaken 1 unit, but now I'm also going to apply vulnerable because we need this guy dead. So it's a choice, right? So you can still take this as DPS Wolverine and not, feel too bad about it, or you could just take Power Slash instead, right? All these things. So I'm really happy with this version of Chain Swipes. It's going to feel better. It's going to give him more function as a debuffing tank if you want to play him that way. I love to play him that way already, so this just sort of amps that. And it also gives extra to the damage builds who just want to run Chain Swipes and run like all the Wolverine stuff, right? Chain Swipes just felt awful in a DPS build. Now it won't because apply 1 vulnerable, then you have Midnight special. And then the other thing is, to a DPS player, full combo apply 1 vulnerable is in practice very similar to gain 1 strengthened, right? So that's kind of what I'm getting at. A DPS Wolverine can still use this card. Lethal Pounce, base, and plus, we've added an effect. So full combo right now on Lethal Pounce is gain 1 strengthened. it now is gain 1 strengthened, gain 1 vulnerable. That is because Wolverine should have a trade-off for having a point and click apply strengthen, because point and click apply strengthen is absurd, and right now there's no trade-off. I also want to give the user a reason to use non-full combo lethal pounce, and that reason, while admittedly not super present, is okay if you get a mod that's, say, on KO do this, or it's a pretty high base damage coefficient on a chain card. It's not unreasonable to just finish off a minion with it now. Yeah, it's hard to make the base lethal pounce card insane without breaking the card by using the full combo effect. So this is sort of a intermediate solution to the problem. And again, if gaining 1 vulnerable and strengthen is an issue, just use this one instead and apply 1 vulnerable, which counters the strengthened. But note that you're going to do less damage because chain swipes does less than lethal pounce, 1 for 1, even with all the stacks and all the clicks. So yeah. Piercing slash, I just changed this to be in tandem with Savage. Apply 1 vulnerable. I made this change to bleed. Not bleed. I made this change to blade. Feels good. That's all. Nothing to say here. Piercing slash may be worth considering. And Eviscerate. Eviscerate was another one that I was like, Eviscerate doesn't really have a place. I wanted to give it sort of that tanking vibe, being the taunt card, and the effect is on KO gain 1 counter. And there's quite a few cards in the game that are, gain resist and on KO gain counter or blah blah blah. And so this is just a means of giving him, instead of block, we're giving him just a random resist, and I say random, but it's a trade-off now. So Eviscerate spread out can still taunt and on KO gain counter, but now if you commit to full combo, you'll gain that resist, you'll taunt, and if you happen to kill them, then great, you get the counter, right? So yeah, this is going to bring Wolverine in a really good position. It does not change the current Wolverine damaging build other than they gain 1 vulnerable. However, in this mod, Rapid Healing has gain 1 resist on it. So you might now start to consider bringing it. You might start to consider cutting Berserk, using Cure, all these things. Now, admittedly, I might add more Cure just innately into Wolverine's kit. But I don't think I need to yet, so that's what I've got for you. It makes tanking Wolverine a lot better, It makes chain swipes a lot better, and now as a character who always runs 4 attack cards, you're gonna have to make some choices now. Whereas before there was no choice; it was just 2 lethal pounce always, and something like a quick swipe or a power slash, and you really never needed to take chain swipes. But there you go. And Deadpool, lastly, nothing right now. He does need a rework. I just don't know what we're going to do yet. He's so disappointing. Even with all my buffs last patch, he still is kind of ho-hum. So pending changes. And finally, the watch list. So like I mentioned already, Iron Man's new plan is being reworked. I have that on the back burner right now. Hulk's always angry. Same thing. Doesn't really make a lot of sense as a card. I'm looking at it. Spider-Man's Chain Strike, I'm probably going to rework this to just be a chain and not if on KO. Spoiler, but it's going to have to change in function. I want to keep its high damage, but there's no chain in the game that hits that hard. And with the reveal, or the more information we have on Venom now, which at the time of this video is releasing in 2 days, they've actually shown that Venom has high damaging chains. So I don't want to just give Spider-Man yet another Venom similarity. So this is something that I'm going to have to really think about. Oops. But yeah, that's what I got for you. That's the patch. And again, links will be in the description for everything. So far, it's been well received. I'm starting a new playthrough. Finally, after this big patch, I'm going to go fresh game, fresh start, Ultimate 3, no items, the whole 9 yards. And then by the time Venom comes out, we'll be able to transition straight into getting Venom. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then, yeah, just, play testing the mod more on live, getting people's feedback, getting people's ideas. And really the goal is to just put the game in a position where every card feels good, every character feels good. Because right now in the base game, we are not there. Louise has changed closer to 300 units of cards or files or text or callers or whatever. Like, and this is only the second patch, guys. So trust me when I say we've got a lot coming down the pipeline that's going to make this just insane. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoy these changes. I hope you enjoy the mod. Let me know in the comments if you've tried it, what you think about it. Give me your feedback, positive and negative. I want it all because I'm trying to build this mod for all players of all skill levels, not just Endgame Ultimate 3, not just New Game Story Mode. I want it to be fun for everybody while still feeling fair. So I will see you guys in the next one. Catch you later, or I'll see you on stream when I start my next run. Peace for now.